I'm glad that you could all join us at this digital event, Delivering a Broadband Africa, delivered to you by the Africa CEO Forum in partnership with Huawei. We have a couple of other events that the group Jeune Afrique is putting together. First of all, we will be putting on a fantastic event championing the cause of women in business. In a few days' time, 300 African women will gather online for the Women Working for Change Summit. Participants will discuss imagining tomorrow, changing today, and sharing their vision of the global challenges to come, as well as the steps that need to be taken to give women their rightful place in spearheading change. So don't miss that. The registration closes on Friday, and there are some extremely talented and interesting speakers. We will also be holding, under the banner of the Africa CEO Forum and in partnership with the International Finance Corporation, the IFC, the first edition of the Financial Industry Summit. And that will be held on the 10th and the 11th of March next year, 2021. This inaugural conference will gather 500 decision makers among the most influential of the financial industry to address key pain points and opportunities around the theme African finance after COVID, rebooting, digitalize, and transform. The registration for that has just opened and you can pre-register online. So when I was preparing to put this seminar together, it struck me that there's little more we can do really to demonstrate the importance of high-speed internet and communications than this panel. We've gathered together a glittering panel of industry players, regulators and institutions, all in one place using broadband technology. No one got on a plane to go to this webinar. They didn't have to. My name is Nicholas Norbrook. I'm the managing editor of the Africa Report. We are part of Group Jeune Afrique, which also runs the Africa CEO Forum. And in my own small corner of the internet as a journalist, I've been able to interview a huge range of people this year using Zoom, Skype, Teams, you name it. I'm sure you know them as well as I do. And when the pandemic goes away, this cultural step forward for me will certainly remain. Our habits have been changed. Meetings that we thought we needed to gather everyone into one room have actually now gone online, and it has worked. There have been teething troubles. I'm sure you know them well, but it has worked. And it's not just journalists, of course. I recently interviewed, using Zoom, of course, the CEO of Africa's biggest bank, Kenya's Equity Bank. And James Mwangi says that he now uses online tools to gather all his regional managers into one virtual room once a month, instead of seeing them once every 6 months. And he can do it more often, he can speak directly to them, and he saved money on large hotel bills. So COVID-19 or not, he will keep doing it. Companies, consumers, and countries all need faster and cheaper connections to the internet. And this webinar will untangle the how. How do we get there? What regulatory framework, what technology, what best practices? Where should the governments invest? And where should, by contrast, they seek to attract investment? What markets are surging? And how do we serve rural communities? How do we move quickly? And we'll hope to get through to all of these things over the next 90 to 100 minutes. But to kick things off, I would like to introduce our expert presentation by Christopher Geerts. Christopher Geerts is the principal analyst for BMIT's broadband practice, and he advises companies who are investing in either new projects or company shareholdings in the fiber or wireless access industry. Christopher, over to you.
Thanks very much, Nicholas. I'm going to talk about the very interesting topic, the state of fiber in Africa. And on the next slide, I want to set some context, which is the three massive challenges that we have. The first is the very vexing problem of digital inclusion or exclusion, that we simply are not getting broadband access to all the citizens of Africa just as it's becoming increasingly important to have access to participate in even the most basic economic activities. The second one is where most of us are at, which is access to true broadband, which is, and we've certainly seen with COVID, that what you need on a daily basis is video. You need to be able to Zoom. You need to be able to access digital classrooms with video. You need to be access high capacity cloud. And in order to do all that, you need really uncapped, affordable, multi-device internet. And that's really the challenge we should be looking at. And then the third one, which is happening at the same time, like an oncoming train, is the fourth industrial revolution, which will either take Africa forward or increase the divide with other countries, depending on connectivity, which is the foundation for the fourth industrial revolution. On the next slide, I just wanted to give some background. So broadband has been very slow and expensive 15 years ago, with very little customer choice, but you have this domino effect. First, the international cables landing and providing a catalyst with accessible broadband, then moving to inland, to cities and connecting with metro connections, and then the third tier being access right down to end users. So I'll unpack those in the next few slides. The first one being on the next slide, the submarine cable. Can I have the next slide? The submarine cables, where you've got this amazing, huge amounts of bandwidth that are affordable and increased choice delivered to the coastal countries in the last few years, say 15 years or so. And you've got this 37% compounded annual growth rate. In spite of all this growth, only 5% of the design capacity of these cables is being used. And even then, we're going to see a doubling of that capacity with Google putting in their Equano cable and Facebook running its to Africa fiber all the way around Africa in the next few years. So on the next slide, we're moving from the submarine cables to the terrestrial cables, which is what you need to bring the capacity from the sea into the cities, into landlocked countries, and into the countryside. And as you can see from the graph, there's been very good pipeline of investment and projections and deployment. And there's some major projects. I've just listed a few there in the blue. You see the Liquid Telecom project going all the way from Cape Town in the south up to Cairo in the north, and also crossing east-west, connecting the two submarine cables on the coasts. You've got various smaller initiatives, many of them private sector, some government sector, some power line companies involved. And then you have the multi-phase project going for many years, the Central African Backbone, connecting the countries in Southern Africa, still going, and at the moment connecting 26 Chad cities. And then you have initiatives like the West African Network by Orange, the operator linking all the West African countries. So on the next slide, I'm moving to the next tier, which is the metro area networks. And this is where the current challenge is really starting, which is connecting across cities to the end users, end businesses, end homes, and mobile towers. And this is a good example. There are many countries where there needs to be work done still, but C² is a very good example of what can be done. It's an open access. In other words, it offers access to all at fair, non-discriminatory, and transparent pricing. And due to their success in Uganda, they've moved to 4 countries, and they now offer over 2,000 kilometers of fiber to many, many service providers and mobile operators. And then the next slide looks at the final challenge, the last mile. Now you'll see on the left that most of Africa has less than 10% fixed line penetration, which is incredibly low. Whereas on the right-hand side, you see there's much higher penetration of mobile. Unfortunately, mobile although it's very good at bringing out access quickly, as they discovered, the International Telecommunications Union did some research after the initial COVID uptake when people started working remotely, and found it's excellent at offering connectivity quickly, but it doesn't scale up to the type of true bandwidth that I mentioned earlier, where you can use video without, where you can really go into gigabyte usage rather than megabyte usage. So on the next slide, I'm introducing the, can you go to the next slide? Yeah, just the comparison of Africa against the world. If you look at the top 50 countries by penetration, the larger countries, Mauritius stands out as being very high penetration, and Reunion as well. And then if you go much lower, you'll see South Africa, which is similar to Poland and Brazil, and then almost off the chart Angola, and not much else in Africa. Looking at actual deployments on the next slide, here are some of the major countries in terms of connectivity. You'll see a year ago, South Africa made up 25% of total fiber to the premises connectivity, and the top 10 countries that I've listed there make up 93% of the total. So the rest of all the countries, the remaining 7%, you can see the next 10 in the top right. And although it's very low, there is high growth. Kenya reported 21% increase in fiber connectivity in the last quarter, driven very much by the COVID crisis as well. And then if I had a look at pricing on the next slide, you'll see that pricing varies a lot, which indicates that there's still a lot of work that can be done in this area. So if I just take something like the 50 megabits, a random sample of different countries, I'll see it varies from $38 a month right up to over $1,000. A lot of scope for improving affordability, which of course drives up usage. And then in my final slide, what I'm doing is I'm just looking at what the constraints are at the moment and what needs to be done to drive increased fiber penetration. So the first category I'm looking at is the legal regulatory environment. There's a lot of red tape. There's a lot of uncertainty about policy and regulation. And one of the biggest areas of hindering us is way leaves, the ability to deploy across roads or pipelines. You'll see the little picture there is a river crossing in Zambia, which took 18 months to negotiate. So the fiber goes very quickly and then suddenly gets stopped by the way leave. In fact, they didn't even use the bridge that was there. They ended up stringing the fiber across between two pylons to overcome that. The pricing is really bad on way leaves. Sometimes people see it as a way of extorting fees. Often government departments try and make money from the fiber deployment. And what they should be doing is trying to promote it. So if I look at the solution on that, you need high-level political support. You need clear policy, which should be evidence-based. And you need to really improve the ease of doing business generally. The sector has to be regulated very strongly so that the current operators are able to provide a fair environment. And you want to promote wholesale open access so that service providers can make a living from offering end user services. An example of where way leaves were brought down in price, for example, was Nigeria, where the federal government decided to offer a 2-year moratorium where they don't charge anything on their national roads for deploying fiber by the operators, as long as they share where they can the same trenches. And that really is a way of catalyzing increased deployment by making it more affordable and improving the investment case. The next area of constraint is the financing, which is very much linked to number one. If there's a certain environment, the financing is available. And unfortunately, mobile operators compete for funds because it offers a much faster return. So fiber needs to be presented in such a way as to offer a more affordable, a better return on investment. One of the things governments can do on financing is consider blended financing, where they partner with the private sector. They can better use their universal service funds to do fiber deployment, and they can aggregate demand, which means where the government itself has demand, they can leverage that demand, for example, connecting government buildings in a particular area to encourage investment in that area. The third area is the lack of demand itself. Because people haven't had fiber access in the past, the ecosystem hasn't built up. And you'll see in many European and other countries, their policies to build up the internet ecosystem and create the demand. And that's an area where government can proactively support small businesses. They can deploy their own e-government services, and they can put more focus on educational institutions, which are one area where you can get early demand and early uptake, and where there's a very big benefit for students to get broadband, and they become the entrepreneurs of the future. So that's my talk. I'll end at that point. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christopher, for that. Christopher Hitz from BMIT. Now, we also want to make you work as well, dear readers, dear listeners rather, and we have a poll for you to answer. We are going to flash that up on your screen now, if you can see that. And the question is, when do you think Africa will achieve full fiber deployment? And you can take that to mean, you know, pretty much full fiber deployment, perhaps not to every last person, but you know, what you would recognize as decent full fiber deployment, 2030, 2040, or 2050. You can submit your answers there, and we'll come back to that shortly. I'd like to turn now to the first leg of our panel. We have some fascinating speakers for you today. Elisabeth Medou-Bedong is the Senior Vice President of Middle East and Africa for the French telecoms company Orange. Karima Mahmoudi is the Central Director of the INTT, a Tunisian telecoms regulator. Tawala Nyarinda Jere is the Principal Program Officer for the AU Development Agency, NEPAD. And Lou Libo is the President of Network Marketing and Solutions Sales Department for Huawei. And I'd like to start with you, Mr. Lou Libo, if I can. You are in constant contact with customers across the continent, be that large corporates, be it countries themselves. What are they asking for? And specifically, what were they looking for during this COVID-19 pandemic? And what do they want to take forward after the pandemic?
Thanks for Nicholas. It's my honor to join this event. I would like to share some idea about these questions. Actually, it's one of the most important subjects that the COVID-19 pandemic is still spreading. It will eventually be brought under control, but it will also drive new changes in the world. And this is something we cannot ignore. First, no matter in China, in Europe, or in Africa, the pandemic control measures have pushed the working, education, and the lives for all of the peoples to online rapidly. We could see that the digital transformation of society has been accepted quickly in just around 6 months, which was expected to be realized in several years before, actually. And also, we also see in Africa, a lot of international summit changed to online, just like today, you know, such as the annual Africa Internet Summit, the Africa Energy and the Gas Summit, you know, and the others. So actually, my colleagues talked to me in Egypt. More than 20 million students continued their studies on distant education platforms during the control period. And the online food delivery platform, I know the name is Talabet, expanded its service rapidly to even more than 8 cities and regions. All of this demonstrates the importance of network connectivities as a public service in one unprecedented way. I think we now could see that connectivity is just like utilities for all this world. We enjoy, all of the people enjoy the online social e-commerce, even buying all of the candle goods and food over the internet. I think we could see that the connectivity and the digitization are becoming more and more popular now, simulating the demand for more interactive and immersive application scenarios. And all of the application scenarios are more interactive, more responsive, and more immersive require, for example, lower latency, higher bandwidth, and more digital technologies to be developed from all of these demands. So that's to say, connectivity is a fundamental enabler. There's no doubt that even in the post-pandemic era, this trend will continue and will have extensive and sustainable impact in the industries. Actually, in China, early to 2013, China has identified the broadband as a foundation to support social transformations, and they leverage simulate information consumptions. So after the pandemic, actually, China has recognized a new position for the broadband network. It will be one of the most important social stable. I'm sure that even in our Africa, many peoples have imagined what the future will be like more quickly. This is very important because all of us here in this discussion will translate this imagination into numbers and evidence.
Absolutely.
And then use it as a factor to guide investment for all of the different levels and allow us to expand a beautiful future of digitalized Africa. Thank you.
Fantastic. And I think that will mesh very well with the viewpoint of the regulator, who has the same interest in getting this better connected Africa to emerge. Let me turn to you, Karima Mahmoudi. Before I do, I'd like to remind everyone, there is a hashtag. If you are a keen user of Twitter, it is hashtag ACF Digital Events. Karima, maybe you could help us understand for Tunisia, what have been the main obstacles and also the main solutions that you have found in terms of developing high-speed access to broadband, and what role really has the regulator played here?
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be on this honorable panel today and to share with you the regulator's point of view on broadband and very high-speed broadband issues. So in Tunisia, we, like all other countries, are faced some constraint on this, but you know we have opening our market to competition since 2000 in mobile since 2002, and for the fixed since 2009, and we have today we are wasting a take off on fixed and mobile data market with the presence of 3 global fixed and mobile operators and infrastructure operators and 6 private internet providers with penetration rate that have for mobile data market 77%, and for the fixed data market 42%, with an increasing more than 10 points in only 2 years in penetration rate. So how this take-off in particular of fixed market is due to first the establishment by the government of a national speed and very high speed broadband strategy since 2012. We have also our national plan who has as access the broadband and high-speed broadband development. Second, the implementation of an independent telecommunication regulatory authority. The provision by the operator of regulated wholesale offers allowing the applicability of fixed broadband offers of the incumbent operator, in addition to the use of radio technology, in particular 4G and LTE TDD, as a complement to wired technology through the use of the box. This is the third thing, is the affordable regulated broadband access and service price. You know, regarding ITU recommendation, the price of broadband plays a major role in terms of penetration. So with these measures in Tunisia, we can have today, we can say that we have a competition in wholesale market, and we are today working in three main elements: international connectivity, by encouraging the deployment and sharing of submarine cables between, we have today in Tunisia, we have 4 submarine cables that the incumbent operator have 3, and the competitors have 1 cable, they share 1 cable. And also we are working on connection to the national backbone and backhaul, by giving the operator the possibility of having access to expand the capacity of the national backbone infrastructure through regulated offers of active infrastructure sharing and passive infrastructure sharing. We are talking about fiber optic infrastructure, and we are working also on local access connectivities. So we set up action to accelerate the development of access network, namely stimulation of XDSL, development of 3G, 4G, and in the future 5G, and the encouragement of deployment of FTTX by all the players in the market.
Fantastic. Maybe we'll come back to that issue of infrastructure sharing in a later round, because I think it is critical. But I'd like to ask Elisabeth, when we had the expert presentation by Christopher Hirt, I was very lucky actually that my microphone was on mute, because when I saw the statistic that 5% of the capacity of undersea cables is currently being used, that's shocking. You know, Orange has just launched Joliba. I think it went live a week ago, and it is a fiber backbone for West Africa. Can you tell us a little bit about the imperatives behind Joliba and what it does? I think you're currently on mute, Elisabeth.
You are right, perfectly right. Now, I hope you can hear me. So yes. I was just saying that I was very happy to take part in this panel discussion with a topic that is very key to us. Yes, Joliba for us is really a fantastic initiative. For us, it's a breakthrough in our ambition to play a key role in the digital transformation of our continent. It's to go more into detail, it's the first and unique regional in the West Africa backbone that connects seamlessly 8 capital cities in West Africa. So from Dakar to Lagos, through Conakry, Monrovia, Bamako, Abidjan, Accra. So it's a combination of land and submarine fiber optical. So it gives a lot of benefits at about 10,000 kilometers on the terrestrial backbone, the same on the submarine cables. So it allows all these capital cities to be seamlessly connected at the same time to 3 different sea cables, namely Main 1, ACE, and SET3. So for the countries that are landlocked, for example, as Burkina Faso or Mali, they have, with only one connection, the opportunity to be connected to 3 different sea cables, to 300 point of presence that Orange Group have around the world. So it's very secure. They don't have to build different routes to manage sometimes many providers to pay for the different routes. For one contract from one link, they have full redundancy. They have high speed connectivity. It can go up to 100 gigabytes. They have an improved customer journey because it's a one-stop shop. And the availability is unmatched. It's 99.99%. Why? Because the land connectivity is doubled in each country. To reach the data center, you always have 2 different routes within the capital city. And within this capital city, the equipments are kept in 2 different data centers located in 2 separate areas in the capital. Within each data center, you have 2 sets of equipment ready to be used. So this infrastructure is operated from a team which is based in Senegal, but is supervised 24/7 using what we call follow the sun mode with other technicians based in France, in India, and in the US. So at any time, our teams can intervene on the link. The customer has one provider to deal with. And for us, it's really critical in terms of improving the access, in terms of improving the speed, and improving the availability of the connectivity, which for us is key. And it's a foundation to build on this digital economy that we are talking about. And the COVID have shown how critical this was in terms of business continuity,
Absolutely.
or not only business, but all kinds of activities. A lot of students are out of school today. We're out of school in the first quarter of the year or the second quarter of the year in the region because they didn't have access to this kind of infrastructure. So for us, it's key. And it takes me to go back to one of the points that Christopher raised, which is the regulation. When we see a project like this, it's fantastic, but it was allowed because it was possible because the regulation allowed to do that. There are a lot of different areas, a lot of different affiliates the countries where we operate, where such a project is just impossible today. Even if we would like to do that, even if we manage to raise the necessary fundings, we know how to operate it, we know how to build it, but we are just unable to do that. So
absolutely, it is the regulation that really absolutely makes the difference between a project like yours happening and not happening. Tawala, I was wondering if perhaps you could point us towards success stories really in terms of African regulation of broadband. Are there countries where there's been a clear ICT policy which has led to clear regulatory actions, which has led to better, cheap broadband for companies and consumers, apart from Tunisia, because we've heard about their plan and their 10% bump in broadband access, which is terrific. But apart from Tunisia, where really should we turn to for best practice on the continent?
Thank you very much, Nicholas. And just to echo again that it's a pleasure and a privilege to be part of this panel. Before I answer your question, though, I really want to congratulate Orange for the project and really also to emphasize the fact that when I first joined NEPAD, that was one of the biggest pushes that we were making. There were 2 things that we were pushing for. One was to make sure that every coastal country had at least 1, if not 2 routes in terms of submarine access. And the second one was to make sure that we could have all the capitals connected, and that capitals could have at least 2 routes inland. So for me to hear that Orange has successfully managed to deliver a project that provides redundancy to 3 undersea cables and connects the capitals of 8 countries, I think that's really a brilliant achievement. And it underscores the fact that we can do it. So these things are not impossible, but there's certain things that have to be put in place in order for us to achieve such connectivity. And I think Elizabeth is right in the sense that sometimes it is the diversity between our countries sometimes that would make that a challenging prospect, because every country perhaps has its own rules, policies, and regulatory environment that makes it very difficult perhaps to navigate when one is trying to build that kind of a seamless connectivity. So I think the case of Orange, I think, is one to be applauded. And I think it is one that we should amplify and learn from to really understand what were the success factors and how can we then replicate that across the region. So in terms of the question you've asked, it's a very difficult question, and I hesitate to start picking out and highlighting specific countries, because that could also put me in a very difficult situation. But I think that there are quite a number of good examples and good practice across the continent.
You must name names.
Well, so as AUD and NEPAD, we're here to speak for the continent at large, and really, I think we can name countries in terms of where we see good progress. But I think perhaps it's also a bit useful to sort of understand where we're coming from and where we're going. So, I mean, we do have the examples, and I'm not going to flag them as good examples or outstanding examples, but I think we all saw from the chart that Christopher shared, the fact that Mauritius, I think, has done very well in terms of how it is tackling the issues of ICT development. Tunisia, obviously, Rwanda, Kenya, Nigeria, Senegal. So there's a whole number of countries, I think, that are doing well in different ways. What I think perhaps is maybe needed is how do we bring all these things together? How do we take all this good practice, all these learnings, and bring them together in a way that allows the continent to move forward? Now, having said that, I think, when you look at it from the perspective of African Union, the digital transformation strategy is an attempt to do that. It's an attempt to sort of say, how do we identify what the strategic priorities for the continent are, and how do we then begin to put in place the different pieces that will allow us to achieve the objectives. If you look at the issues around, how are we going to bring the prices down to affordable levels? How are we going to make sure that the majority of our population has access to affordable, but not only affordable, quality connectivity? Those things cannot be done in isolation, with countries working in isolation, because as a continent, I think we were very clear to realize that there's a lot of dependencies, and those dependencies translate, for instance, into issues and aspects of trade. And with the coming in of initiatives such as the CFTA, it becomes very important that we are sort of moving everybody along in the same direction and at the same rate. So I think it is important for us to sort of begin to identify those pockets of good practice. So the cases in Tunisia, the Orange case, which is a private sector driven initiative, the cases maybe in Rwanda, and see how do we scale such initiatives in order for us to achieve the targets that we have set, not only for 2030, but also for Agenda 2063.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We're going to head to Mali now, but not before we find out the results of our poll and find out really how optimistic or not you are. Looks like the majority of you said 2040 for the decade in which Africa will achieve full fiber deployment. Although it's a good question because it has split the audience neatly between those 3 possibilities. Well, we're, as I said, going to head towards West Africa now and speak with Minister Hamadoun Touré of Mali. Minister, are you there? Dr. Torre?
Yes, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Yeah, I'm muted here.
Fantastic. Many years ago, when I was a cub reporter, I spoke to you when you were running the Geneva ITU, I believe it was called then. The pace of change in Africa, and the information and communications technology in Africa has been such that you've seen a huge leap forward. It doesn't prevent there from being large patches of rural areas which are still very tough to reach. And I was wondering if you could help us understand what those challenges are, deploying broadband in such a huge country as Mali, with such remote and sparsely populated areas.
Yeah, thank you very much. First of all, it's a real pleasure for me to join this Africa CEO Forum and this wonderful team of participants and speakers. As you rightly said, I had the opportunity to run the ITU, the International Telecommunication Union, and then later on to be the founding chairman of, founding executive director of Smart Africa, which was built to create a single digital market in Africa. And now back home, I've been put in charge of showing what I can do at home, what I've done outside. So it's a great challenge. Mali being a very large country, 1.2 million square kilometers, very large distances, going through over 1,500, over 1,800 kilometers between the two extremes, and with very sparsely populated areas and villages. So we have the challenge of making sure that ICT is used as a tool, first of all. And having joined the ministry, I can tell you some of my fellow ministers from agriculture, health and education, and the territorial administration are very keen to use this tool for their best. And this makes my task easier because I have users who really want to use, who are already convinced that they need this tool. I've found a very good infrastructure, over 12,000 kilometers of fiber, 8,000 of them being from Orange, and another 4,000 from another operator. Mali being a landlocked country, it's usually seen as a challenge being landlocked. In fact, it becomes an opportunity because here we're in the center of a circle now. Our capital city linked to 5 other capitals through the fiber, and therefore we hope to connect the other remaining 2 capital cities. That, you know, Mali is surrounded by 7 countries, so we have that privilege of being in the middle of it, and we make good use of it. I must say that one of our greatest challenges is the cost of internet so far. Despite the large infrastructure that has been put in place, I believe that the price is still high, and that is due to the fact that the wholesalers are also selling to the customers directly as well, and therefore there's not enough competition. There's something that I will change in the next couple of months by putting a structure whereby the ISPs will be able to have a better price so that they can make a living. After all, they have a better customer service, and they also increase the quality of service. So our great challenge is bringing the cost down, making it affordable, while competition will enable us to create many SMEs that will in turn create jobs for the youth. Youth unemployment is a key issue for every government today, and it's the case here as well. I'll stop here so far if you want to give the floor to some other fellows.
I was wondering what concrete impact you can see from a rise in broadband penetration. You spoke of various ministries who obviously will be grateful of better connectivity. How will it affect farmers? How will it affect small businesses in Mali to have faster and cheaper broadband?
Yeah, just last week we had a seminar in Koulikoro, which is about 60 miles from Bamako. It's a regional capital city where farmers were gathering. They had a seminar, and the theme was the use of ICT as a team. So I was a keynote speaker there. And there are many young companies that were there, startups with their applications for farmers, bringing different solutions. And they believe in the fact that the solutions can only come from them because they're the ones who know the problems. And I found a very good group of people who are really, really eager to use ICT, including the minister. The other good example is our administration. I can say thanks to COVID, we are doing all our Council of Ministers meetings online now through video conferences that are working very well. And we are moving toward, of course, by end of next month, I will hope that we'll be able to fully be able to share also documents, which was not the case now. And we'll use the capacities of our data centers here as well, which is already also existent. So what I'm trying to say here is that there is capacity, there is a network. It's not being fully used. I would say that the orange fiber is being used probably at 20% of its full capacity, which is, for me, is a waste. And therefore, we're trying to make sure that there will be more usage, and then we'll force the prices to go down.
Fantastic. Last question. You obviously interact with the private sector very regularly. Quickly, if I may, I wanted to ask, what policies have you found been the most effective if you're trying to get the private sector to come in and invest in this critical infrastructure? What has been for you the best thing, the most useful thing in your armory of incentives to help pull them in?
Yeah, that's a very good question, because wherever you go, including in the UN, where I operated for about 16 years, you will see everywhere there are laws, there are regulations, there are strategies that are attracting private sector, that are saying it's good to work with private sector. But in reality, it's not there. The hand is extended, but when you're too far, you can't make that handshake.
Right.
And exactly what I've done in the ITU, bringing private sector closer, that's what I will be doing here, because that was missing. And the next piece, the missing piece, after 1 month on the job, I have studied the environment, and the only missing link is a kind of a network of between the government entities and the private sector. And therefore, I'm going to create what I call the Broadband Council. It's the image of the Broadband Commission that I created in ITU. It goes together the small enterprises as well as the startups, and deal on the strategy together and make benefit in be sharing that, co-sharing someone from, and that's how we're laying this down. And therefore, I believe that that will be the best way for us to make sure that private sector is being used at its full extent.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Minister. We appreciate
Yeah,
appreciate your time and this idea of bringing private and public sector into fora to interact is very, very important. I'd like to go back to our panel, if I may.
If if I can say in a few minutes, I will be because from 3 o'clock I will have to sneak out my time here. If
we're happy to release you. Thanks again for your time.
Thank you.
Great. So Lu Libo, let's talk about targets, because if you don't put a target on something, then you'll never really stretch to meet it, as they say. And in particular, fiber connections. Now, the European Union have come out with a set of targets for fiber and high-speed fiber. South Korea has started some very ambitious deployments. China also has its own targets. What kind of objectives and targets do you think will be appropriate and useful for Africa to think about here?
Thanks for Nicholas. Actually, it's a difficult question for this part. With our study on globally experience for the broadband implementation, it shows that the fiber broadband development should have 2 stages. The first stage is about the infrastructure construction, from the fiber backbone network to fiber metro, and then to households or the enterprises. The second stage is about full-fibre digital enablement. Actually, in past years, the full-fibre infrastructures were being constructed in many countries and regions. And it's very important in this year, the full-fibre infrastructure constructed to help repair the economic and the societal damage from the pandemic. Actually, the different countries, we see that globally are accelerating the implementation of fiber infrastructure. I would like to show 2 examples. First one, the European Commission announced, very ambitious plan. The name is Next Generation EU. It has 2 major targets: the twin green and the digital transitions. What means a digital transition? It means a fully covered fiber infrastructure, gigabit society, and the large-scale application of digital technology brought by the high-speed broadband network. I think the world will be the more closely connected, and this plan is recognized as a historic step in EU level. Another case will from China. From 2013, just like I just shared, China has started the large-scale fiber construction. China deploying the strategy, the strategy named the Broadband China. So based on this strategy, a national-wide large capability backbone network was constructed. I can see it's a super backbone in the history. And also follow this strategy, the master plan of national-wide home broadband upgrading was carried out. By the end of 2019, more than 90% of homes and enterprises was using the fiber access already. The totally is more than 400 million subscribers. Actually, if we calculate all of the capability from the network, more than 8 million fiber access ports was constructed in the past years. So thanks for all of this fiber network, it granted China could respond quickly for the impact from the pandemic. In recent years, China also start the new infrastructure plan. The full fiber digital enablement will be one of the most important target. In fact, we also see in Africa, different countries also start this kind of fiber construction. In past several years, many projects, start to construct just like our participant shared submarine, even fiber metro, and also the multinational fiber backbone networks. It's very exciting things. Most of them, was constructed with a good business result. We can see that. And recently, we also see many implementation of fiber network to connect the household and also for the enterprises in some countries. These are big projects and need all of the cooperation from the government to the operators, together with all of the participants in this industry. So meanwhile, to all of the stakeholders, how could we see it's an inspiring direction or not? I don't know, but I think this is a very good directions. We can continue to talk. Thanks for your questions.
Absolutely. I wanted to ask Elizabeth about one of these factors which we've not talked about much, which is the pull factor. And generating content in Africa for Africa, I think will do more than anything to provide incentives for infrastructure players to see that there is genuinely a market. What is Orange doing to help foster more local production and therefore more local use and profitability of broadband?
Yeah, I totally agree with you that the gap that we see today between internet usage, generally speaking, between Africa and the rest of the world, part of it, it's linked to the coverage. Obviously, there is a coverage gap. In the rest of the world is about 7%. In our region, in Sub-Saharan Africa, it's about 30%. That's one of the gaps that we are trying to address. I'm not going to come back to it. But there is also a usage gap. And this usage gap is even bigger. Today we have about 350 people using internet in Africa. But we have about 500 people living in areas that are connected and not using internet. So for us, this usage gap partly is linked to affordability. We have discussed about it. The more we optimize on the business model of operators, the more cost efficient the services will be, including the internet. So that's one thing. The other thing is the devices. And we have been working with some partners. The last one is a partnership with Google, where we launched Sansa Touch, which is a smartphone, which is very affordable. This is another way. And the third one is content. So people, for them to be able to use the internet, to spend money, to do some budget arbitration between this and something else, they need to see the value that they bring to them. Today, about less than 5% on the application that people are using in Africa are created in the continent. Less than 5%, which is few, very limited. And obviously we think that if we want this fourth revolution to be beneficial to the continent, if we want to take the benefit of this revolution, we need to make sure that most of the value is kept in the continent. One way to do that is to have the relevant content that are tailored to the needs of the people. And for us, those contents should come from the knowledge of the different countries. Africa is a continent, and there are a lot of different Africa, if I may say so. So the more we have content tailored to the need of the different industry, tailored to the usage of the customer, the better it will be for the industry, but also for the customer. So what do we do to address that? We have been trying since many years today to improve the overall innovation ecosystem in Africa. So we are investing in, I would say, all kind of aspects of fostering the innovation. We support startups in all the stages of their development. We use to help the emergence of projects. We have competition like Orange Digital Venture Prize, which has been running for 10 years now. The last edition finished few days ago. This is one element. We have in a lot of affiliates what we called Orange Fab. They are accelerators of startups. We have them in about 8 affiliates. We have a dedicated venture fund, Orange Digital Africa Venture Fund, which with 5 million euro, which aim is to support startups. And there was lately a competition, a seed challenge, where 7 startups in some of our affiliates, including Egypt, Cameroon, Senegal, will be granted about 500 to 700,000 euro to support them. And there will be a specific vehicle created by Orange Venture Africa, named Orange Seed Venture Africa, which aim is to support, to fund the seed part of the startups, with the ambition to support 100 startups by 2025. Which
fantastic.
Is
that's really fantastic. Perfect way to drive usage and thereby
exactly
provide the content. Thank you so much for that. Tawela and Karima, we're going to come back to you for the Q&A sessions. But I'd like now to head to Benin for our second ministerial intervention. Minister Aurélie Adam Soule, greetings. How are you? I think you may...
Yes.
Great.
It's okay now. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, okay, perfectly. Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicholas.
Welcome to the webinar. We'd love to learn more about where Benin is currently in terms of its development of high-speed internet.
I've been hearing the first speaker, and I was pretty much in agreement with him that Africa still has a long way to go when it comes to broadband. And that's why I would like to congratulate you for this webinar, and I'm really delighted to be part of it. Africa still has a long way to go, but we're seeing a tremendous, I would say, usage of internet in Africa now. Elizabeth was mentioning how content helps with our culture. And if we want people to continue to use the internet, we may be able to bring the infrastructure everywhere in our countries. And now we're seeing governments in Africa looking at the broadband issue as an important one. And I think it's a really great thing. In Benin, we've done a lot. Actually, we've done we've made a lot of investment in fiber optic. Today we have more than 2,000 kilometers of backbone that we have been able to build, and we also having a lot of metropolitan fiber optic in Benin, in Cotonou. Cotonou is the main city in Benin, but also outside Cotonou. It's true that we know it's not sustainable to do fiber everywhere. So we're also looking at how to bring the best infrastructure, connectivity infrastructure, depending on the location and also depending on the usage. We have to make sure that the investment we're making is adapted to the kind of usage that the population needs. So we made a lot of investment those last 3 or 4 years. And if I were to talk about impact, just to give a few figures, in 2016, we were around 20% of internet penetration. And now, last year in 2019, we were about 53% of internet penetration, showing that we have done really we've been moving forward talking about internet penetration. In the affordability part, talking about impact as well, I think it's also something that bring people to use the internet is affordability. And the last report of Alliance for an Affordable Internet show us that we've been actually going on the right side in terms of the affordability rate, going from 16.6% in 2015 to 5.9% last year. So those are actually the results of reforms project that we've been able to put in place. And I think with our 2 submarine cables, the 3rd one is coming, we've been able to bring broadband to the population, but we're still working on it.
One of the things that Minister Hamadou Touré of Mali was talking about was creating a forum where the private sector and where regulators and government could get together and find areas of cooperation and areas where everyone can work together. Have you managed to do something similar in Benin?
Yes, we've done a lot talking about the private sector. Actually, we started with easing the way SMEs and also big enterprises are doing business. Because usually, you know, when an operator wants to roll out a network, they will need a building permit, land permit, not to mention all the other procedures that they need to go through. So we were able to actually digitalize all the processes to make it quicker and to also make sure that the operators were not actually having hindrance in the process to roll out. So now all those procedures are really online. The regulator also digitalized all the requests. So now when an operator wants to roll out, it's possible to ask for frequencies online. And so it allows us to monitor how we actually bring incentive to the operators by digitalizing all those procedures. So that's the ease of doing business aspect. On the other aspect, talking about the sector itself, we managed actually to clarify the regulatory and legal landscape for the operators. We now have a complete set of legal environment document. I would say it's a law, the digital law actually, which address all the aspects of digital economy today. So the operators can actually have a predictability in terms of what is needed to operate as an operator in Benin. So the clarity is really key. We also did, Elizabeth was mentioning how regulatory and legal aspects were key to roll out Joliba. And I totally agree, because in Benin, for instance, when you want to roll out, when an operator wants to have a new submarine cable point in Benin, there's no need to wait for a long period, because you will have to wait maybe for a public tender that the government will issue. You just have to go to the regulator. It's a simple authorization that you have to ask to the regulator. So, and so it's not a big deal, actually. We did the same for the ISPs, because before, to be an ISP in Benin, you have to wait for the government to decide to issue a public tender. But today we have simplified the process, and it's only an authorization, because as Dr. Amadou was saying, we want the ISPs also to take power and to be able to provide services to the population. So we've done a lot with private sector. I could talk for hours.
We could absolutely listen to you for hours. Sadly, our time here is very limited. Thank you so much for sharing your insights, and it's obviously great to hear that so much has been done in Benin. Thank you very much, Minister.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we'll go now to our question and answer session. Karima, let me start with you. We're going to talk a little bit about regulation, but we have a question from Apollo Njabahika, who asks, what solutions are most suitable for low-cost, last-mile connectivity, and how can you foster an environment where those solutions can come to market?
Thank you very much. So for this solution, we have as we are speaking in the first session, that it's about implementing a decision about sharing infrastructure. So mainly local unbundling, and mainly for, so the regulator will implement decision, ex ante regulation, how to, if I will be very precise, that we will implementing an ex ante regulation on wholesale markets to impose to the incumbent operator to share his infrastructure with all the competitors, and to ensure that the cost will be to decrease the cost of connectivity, and to have an affordable price of connectivity. Also, we will have some other measures, like the local authority will ensure that the new or upgrade building are ready to receive very high speed through in their building. Also, we will implement a universal service political to ensure that the unserved area of countries are served and they have a connection. The regulator and the government will take measures and decision to ensure that that the price will be low, and that to encourage operator to share their infrastructure, and even we encourage public society or public entity to share their excellent capacity with the operators to have or to decrease the price of connectivities.
Fantastic. Tawela, I wonder if you could help us with this one. We have a question from Abimbole Alele, who asks, of the $100 billion of investment that is expected or hoped for into African communications, is this just for fiber deployment, or should we be looking at a combination of fiber, WiMAX, satellite technologies to facilitate quick broadband coverage and access?
So I think the short answer is that clearly we have to look at a range of different options, because we are working across the continent in environments that are very different, and where you really cannot do a one-size-fits-all, even when it comes to the issues of connectivity. I think it's always very important for us to remember also that 60 to 70% of our population is actually in rural areas, which tend to be underserved, and where perhaps the kind of connectivity that is required may be a bit different than in our urban or metro areas. But having said that, I think it's also very important to clarify the fact that that 100 billion cannot only be about the hard infrastructure. You know, we have to think about other things that underlie the provision of services. If we're talking about a digital economy, much has been said already about the fact that we need local content, we need homegrown solutions, but that then requires that we are also investing in the capacities of our young people and our institutions to be able to deliver that capacity. So that 100 billion has to really be looked at to say, yes, infrastructure, but what else beyond infrastructure that's going to help us to really fully actualize a digital economy. So investments must be made in skilling and education, investments must be made in innovation and entrepreneurship. And I think Orange has given us some very interesting examples of how that can be done. And then, of course, we've talked about the issues around policy, legal, and regulatory environments. And we've heard from the two ministers the different kinds of things that they are putting in place in their countries. But all those things have to be resourced somehow in order for them to be effective. So I think even as we're talking about that 100 billion, we really have to also be thinking very strategically about how we will actually invest that $100 billion in order to achieve the needs of the digital economy in Africa.
Absolutely. Well, Mr. Lulibo, we've had some questions about fixed 5G, which I personally can't pretend to know much about. But is it a common platform? What might it mean to Africa? And is there a business case for it yet?
Good questions. Actually, the fifth generation fixed network. This is a full name from the 5G. It is proposed by ETSI as a standard direction for fixed network development in the futures. The concept of fifth generation fixed network is building an ubiquitous gigabit fiber network and enables a digital transformation in different industries, including the homes, enterprises, and so on. So actually, we do believe that the fiber as a best media is characterized to be large bandwidth, lower latency, higher stability, even for safe, reliable, and energy saving. Actually, for your questions, I think the fifth generation fixed standard, the question is about the business, but for me, I would like to talk about, just because I hear a lot of questions about the full fiber connections, if it's time to construct the fiber in Africa or not. So I would like to focus on this part. So just because I would like to introduce some good solutions. How could we reduce the cost to construct the fiber solution here? Only we have enough the connections, then we could generate new business based on this infrastructure. So, so as we said, the fiber is is valued not only as a the medium, but also the catalyst to industries and economic development. In one side, it brings the broadband speed to homes and enterprises. And in the other side, fiber connections is also changing the manufacturing. If we could deeply to use the fiber to reconstruct the network in manufacturing and other industries. Actually, in China, after they upgrade the home broadband, the next step now is focus on the high-speed industry internet to further unleash the potential of the fiber connections. So to Africa, I do believe it's a good time to start or speed up the fiber network constructions. So first, we now have matured the technologies and the implementation tools after the massive construction in Asia, Europe, and also Latin America. The new solutions will allow us to install the fiber devices in any environment. Innovative energy methodologies have been introduced and helped to deploy the fiber network in very fast and convenient ways. We have already seen that the normal workers, before we need the very professional work, but now only normal work are able to deploy the fiber network with only days of simple training in Agraria. Automatic tools also could be generate detailed fiber network designs in minutes before it's months or it's weeks. So the second is the industry chain is matured with reasonable costs now. Also, the business cases of fiber around the world have already proved it.
Fantastic.
Sorry.
I fear you.
Hello?
Hi, I'm sorry. We just had a short problem with the communications.
Okay. I think Africa is the youngest regions from our side. The potential and also the demand for all of the ICT is huge in the future. So if based on the tools, the new solutions for the fiber constructions, how could we continue to support all of the operators in this domain, in this part? This is our target in the futures. We will do that.
Thank you. Elizabeth, we don't have much time, so I'm going to ask you to use your best efforts at compression and synthesis. But I just wanted to rebound off something that Tawela said earlier about the need to spend obviously on broadband infrastructure, but also on the skills that are so important. You know, from the perspective where you sit with Orange, do you find you have a sufficient pipeline of qualified candidates coming into your various subsidiaries across West and Central Africa?
Well, it's clearly for us, the skill issue is critical for us to benefit from this digital economy. So to come back to your question, it's really something we strive to do. We have identified 7 key skills, and we do all we can to find the right people. Sometimes we ourselves train our staff. We have built some specific program, for example, for cyber security. We are partnering with some schools, like in Côte d'Ivoire, on data scientists. So we make sure to attract or to build all the skills in order to cover these 7 priorities that we have identified in terms of the right skill that we need in order to realize our ambition. So it's something that we are working on. And well, there are a lot of talented people out there. The aim for us is to make sure that we can attract them, we can give them some perspective, and that they would choose us instead of choosing Google or Facebook or those of the kind.
Sure. Fantastic. Thanks very much for your respecting the shortness of what was required. I'd like now to turn to Hao Tao to give us a final word, really. Hao Tao is the Vice President of Huawei Technologies. Mr. Hao Tao, you have the floor.
Yes, I'm online. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you perfectly.
Thank you, Nicholas. Your Excellencies, speakers, distinguished guests. First of all, on behalf of Huawei, I would like to express sincere gratitude to speakers and participants of today's event. Today, you have delivered a very fruitful webinar with your valuable and unique insights. I hope the audience enjoyed as much as I did. Due to the ongoing pandemic, we cannot, get together to shake hands, give each other a hug, but with the broadband network, we can still talk face to face regardless of the physical distance. However, up to 60% of Africans are still not connected to the mobile or fixed internet. With the pandemic, the broadband connections have never been so important. People can retrieve job opportunities, education, and medical care through broadband services. It is time to take rapid and radical actions to bring universal, affordable, and reliable broadband network to Africa. Africa has made a lot of efforts to speed up the development of broadband with innovative and efficient ways. For example, South Africa found innovative ways to deal with the temporary spectrums to ensure the fast connections, especially during the pandemic. And working with Huawei together, Uganda introduced a multiple investment to build their national backbones, serving around 10 million people now at this moment. And 2,200 kilometers high-speed fiber network has been constructed in Mali. And also 2,000 kilometers backbone network and nearly 200 kilometers metro network in Benin help people get better connected. And Nigeria also released a national broadband plan this year with a big target focusing on both mobile and fixed fiber broadband. Of course, other countries also made their own efforts, like working permit to build up fiber, release of the right of way. All these efforts of crucial importance to deliver a smooth and fast broadband deployment. Being a long-term close partner, Huawei is committed to continuously providing products and services of high performance and a reasonable price to each and every African citizen. As you all know, Huawei has a vision of bringing digital to every person, home, and organization for a fully connected and intelligent world. We are absolutely thrilled to see the vision being realized step by step as we continue to help our partners boost internet capacities and build digital resilience on the African continent. The pandemic will begin sooner or later, so we need to consider both short-term and long-term strategies. In the short run, probably we just need to consider the fast, even temporary connections. But in the long run, we have to consider the high quality services. Besides, more importantly, with affordable price. And to recover economy, from the pandemic, and the development of the digital economy with broadband technologies could be best choice. And of course, we need a plan for the target policies and actions. Let's do our best and leave no one behind. We say connect the unconnected for a better Africa. Partners, together we can make it happen. Thank you. Merci.
Thank you very much, Hao Tao, the Vice President of Huawei Technologies. That brings us to the end of this webinar. We want to thank all of our guests, our ministerial interventions, our experts, panelists, and all the members of private sector and regulatory bodies who have helped instruct and inform us today. And there are many, many constructive elements, I think, things to take forward. I'm not going to try and sum it up because I wouldn't do it justice, but I want to thank you for listening and staying with us to the end and for participating in our poll. And don't forget, we will have other digital events which you must look out for. Again, the Women Working for Change, the registration closes on Friday for that. And next March, our inaugural Africa Finance Industry Summit. That is one not to miss, a 2-day event happening March 10th and 11th. My name is Nicholas Norbrook. You can find all our work at theafricareport.com. Thanks very much for listening.